If you love liberty, declare your independence by signing the Shire Society Declaration at shiresociety.com.
Awesome. I mean, I can do it, I guess.
Begin the hearing on House Bill 1792, and the chair recognizes the sponsors, the Honorable Representative Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Dan Hines, representing the town of Merrimack, and I'm a co-sponsor on this bill. And this bill is slightly similar. It addresses the same subject as my last bill, which decreases penalties for drug offenses. And while the last bill was rather limited, this goes much further. So I like to say we have granite hammer, and this takes a sledgehammer to granite hammer. We all know there's an opioid crisis. I suggest our way of jailing people out of it is not working, does not work. War on drugs, I suggest, has been a failure, and it has harmed people who need the help the most. So this bill, basically across the board, is reducing drug penalties. So for a first offense charge, other than marijuana, it's separate altogether, we're not touching that. It's reducing possession from a Class B felony for a first offense to a Class B misdemeanor. Now the difference between a Class B misdemeanor and a Class A is Class A has the possibility of jail time, Class B, no possibility of jail time. So the judge could still order probation, still could order fines, and for someone with their first offense, first time, possibly with the criminal justice system, this certainly can serve as a wake-up call, let people know it's against the law, you can't do that, and you can have things hanging over their head. And going back to the rehabilitation and deterrence, there's still significant deterrence to someone because second offense still is going to have more serious penalties. So under this bill, if it were to be adopted, a second offense would be a Class A misdemeanor, and that has up to 12 months in jail. I would suggest that is still a really serious penalty for someone who this could be their second time in the criminal justice system, and both times could have been small amounts of cocaine, small amounts of ecstasy. This bill, it's not decriminalizing those drugs, it's not legalizing the drugs, it's doing what I suggest is making a more appropriate sentence for certain cases. So it was discussed during the last hearing how prosecutors can have this discretion. Ultimately, judges, for the most part, their hands are tied. It's good that prosecutors have discretion. A lot of prosecutors are reasonable, some not so much. It's my understanding that the Merrimack County Attorney's Office has a flat policy of never reducing felony drug charges. So if the client can't get it resolved at district court, he gets over there, first offense with any small amount of cocaine, any small amount of ecstasy, anything that falls under Schedule 1, 2, 3, or 4, they face those felony charges. The prosecutor just will not reduce it. This is tying the hands of the prosecutor, saying, we the legislature, we're recognizing we don't want people to do it, but it's causing more harm than we're actually solving. This, I think, brings penalties more in line with a compassionate system that wants to help people. And I think if we look at other countries around the world who have addressed drug problems, the countries that have succeeded the most are countries who have drug reform basing on penalties. So countries like Portugal, where they're basically decriminalizing it, and other countries where they're focusing on prevention and allowing people to safely or more safely use drugs, I think is ultimately a step in the right direction. So again, we're not decriminalizing it, it's still a criminal offense, but it's just the penalties are a lot more in line with what people actually get anyway. But ultimately it is something, step in the correct direction I could suggest. And I believe other people are going to testify as Bill, so I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Representative Gagey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't this a similar bill to what you just presented, was it just presented earlier, House Bill 1678, reducing the penalty for certain first offense drug possession charges?
It's similar. So similar, yes, there's a couple differences. So my other bill would change from a Class B felony to a misdemeanor, and an unclassified misdemeanor, if you adopted my bill, it could be a Class A misdemeanor for a first offense, which carries up to 12 months in jail. This would be a Class B misdemeanor, so there's no possibility of jail time for a first offense under this bill. And for my bill that I just introduced, second offense penalties would have been a felony. In this case, second offense penalties are no longer a felony. They'd be the Class A misdemeanor, which has the possibility of 12 months in jail. So that part of the bill, this is just going further than my other bill. The other difference is this bill makes changes. It looks like paragraphs 23 through 26 deal with qualifying person selling cannabis to someone not a qualifying patient. So this bill does lower those penalties as well. My bill did not address that as well. So this bill has some similarities to my bill, but just goes further and is expanding into different areas as well.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Paul?
Thank you. So are we talking about just marijuana here, or are we talking about other controlled drugs, and how much?
Yep, so other than that last paragraph 3 of the bill, which is sentences 23 through 26, that part's just marijuana. So the rest is the other categories of drugs. So the first paragraph dealing with schedules 1 through 4, and that's oddly does include marijuana, but it's specifically something different, so it is not included under this. So it would be cocaine, heroin, ecstasy, methamphetamines. I don't know what's in 3 or 4. And then in Schedule 5, those are really the least amount of ones. I believe like steroids, things like that fall in that category. I forget. Can you remind me of your question? I also had it. Can you remind me of your question? I was going to make another point, but I forgot what the...
Pretty much,
That's your
how much?
question
How much?
Oh, how much? Yeah, so this bill also does not change the amount, so the amount is already in statute for when it gets up to something such as selling or manufacturing. And also, again, prosecutors can use their discretion if they see someone who has numerous bags lined up in a baggie and has some prices on it, or they see someone giving it to people, they're still going to charge them with distribution.
Good. My question is, how are you using the word analog? Is that an organic chemistry thing, a designer drug that just does the same results, but maybe it's just altered a little bit, and you use it as an analog to cover things that aren't listed here?
So that, we're not making any changes to existing law on that, so...
What's your notion? Sorry. What's your idea of what analog means?
So it's my understanding, I believe is last term possibly, the legislature included certain analogs just because nowadays, I forget what they're called, basically people would take a drug like fentanyl or like heroin or something like that, and then fentanyl or carfentanil is an analog of a certain drug. So I'm not a chemist, but I have a basic understanding of it. Is you just change a small amount and it would technically get you outside of these prohibitions until the federal government basically caught up and included it in the scheduled classes. So analog is basically a form of the drug, is the way I try to explain it to people. And so this bill is not actually changing anything to do with analogs. So if it's already prohibited as an analog, it's still going to be prohibited, it's just going to have less of a penalty.
Representative O.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How do the drug courts and what takes place in the drug courts affect what you're trying to do on that?
Yeah, so that was also an issue I'm glad it came up because I didn't address it in my original testimony. The trooper spoke with the drug courts. Yes, drug courts are in Superior Court. However, Superior Courts have jurisdiction over misdemeanor cases. They can get sent to Superior Court by information. So there's nothing preventing Superior Courts from handling misdemeanor drug charges. Now, it's my understanding that Superior Court drug court, it's limited in when they get into, when people go to it. So it typically is people who have a proven record of it. I think they also have to have other crimes like theft or something like that. So there's really a certain type of people that tend to go into drug court. So they have to admit to their guilt, which is fine. And there's it's really a lengthy process, but it's basically drug court is not for a first-time person who has a small amount of drugs. They're just never gonna get in that drug court. And so the extent Superior Court, they could have it with misdemeanors. I don't know the Superior Court, if they did have a policy or rule not to handle misdemeanors, there's no reason they couldn't change that. In regards to a Class B misdemeanor, presumably that would stay at the district court level. But I mean, a lot of the things drug courts can do, judge already has the authority to do during his sentencing, so they can put people on probation. I think that's one of the biggest things drug court does. But drug court, typically it's a process where people go back and they check in a whole lot with the court. So while they don't do that now at district court, there's nothing preventing judges from doing a bunch of review hearings, have people come in, check up on people, see that they're doing fine. So while our system may not presently have the system in place to allow that, I don't think there's anything preventing it. I think the courts could do it on their own. It'd be great if the legislature took another look at that. So I would suggest this isn't preventing things from being done, and it could be otherwise done.
Thank you.
There's no further questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair calls in your
May I? I'm sorry.
You can try, I can only go by pink card, you can try a pink card.
You're so right.
You're outside.
I can wait if she should stay right where I'm.
Sure. Yeah, if you,
Elizabeth.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Sorry, if you want to, you could turn it pink card after late.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure.
And he just welcomed you up front to go ahead.
Oh, all right, cool. So today hi everybody, I'm Elizabeth Edwards. I represent Hillsborough District 11 in Manchester. Today has kind of a theme for me because the New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition is putting on this great symposium today over at the Police Standards and Training Building. And the focus of that symposium is harm reduction in an opioid era. And I took a little break out of that symposium to come over here and talk about harm reduction some more, and then I'm going to go straight back over. So, let's talk about harm reduction. The United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world, okay? It's not the highest incarceration rate in the English-speaking world. It's not the highest incarceration rate in, you know, the industrialized world or the highest incarceration rate out of like liberal Western democracies. No, it is the highest incarceration rate in the entire world. Sorry, I get very passionate about this issue. I have a lot of energy today. People recognize that this is a problem, and I hope that most of you recognize that this is a problem, but I would like to know what actions you are willing to take to actually address this issue. It's multi-causal. One of those causes is the increase in severity of sentencing and the ramping up of the drug war that was started by the Reagan administration in the 80s. That is one of the causes of this crisis. And this bill doesn't fix the drug war, doesn't end the drug war, it just scales it back a little bit. It says that prison, which is a terrible place, like the food makes you sick, you don't have access to your loved ones, you lose so many opportunities for the rest of your life. Like if you're a convicted felon, you're not going to be able to escape from poverty. It's our prison system and the way that we treat drug offenses in this country and in this state is just a disaster. I think that prison is a tool that should only be used to punish crimes that actually hurt other people, and drug offenses do not fall under that heading. So let's get real about solving over-incarceration in this country, in this state. Let's use tools that fit the problems that we're facing. Public health approach is the way to solve the opiate crisis. We have tried criminal justice approaches and it's just not working. In case you hadn't noticed, it's not working. So I hope I didn't offend people too much. I would like to read you one paragraph from a study called Ex-Offenders and the Labor Market for the people here who care about, you know, economic productivity and, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships and all of that. It's not just a human cost, it is an economic cost. Not just to the taxpayers, but to the entire economy and therefore to all of us, because the people who could have produced goods and provided services just are no longer able to do so. A felony conviction or prison or jail term can have a substantial negative impact on future job prospects. Researchers have identified several distinct channels for this effect. Time behind bars can lead to deterioration in a worker's human capital, including formal education on the job, experience, and even soft skills such as punctuality or customer relations. Incarceration can also lead to the loss of social networks that can help workers find jobs and, worse, provide former inmates with new social networks that make criminal activity more likely. Incarceration or felony conviction can also impart a stigma that makes employers less likely to hire ex-offenders. In many states, a felony conviction also carries significant legal restrictions on subsequent employment, including limitations on government employment and professional licensing. And that's certainly the case in New Hampshire. After a felony conviction or after time behind bars, you're much less likely to be able to get a job in a licensed trade. So there are just so many reasons for passing this bill. I know it seems radical, but to me it's pretty common sense.
Representative Birch.
In your opening statement, did you also mean to include China and Russia?
Oh yeah, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, they all have lower incarceration rates than the US.
Did you know New Hampshire has the lowest incarceration rate out of 50 states?
And that's wonderful. I still don't think that drug offenders belong in prison, where they're at a higher rate, a higher chance of being raped and assaulted, where they lose their social connections, where they lose their prospects for economic prosperity, and frequently become a permanent underclass.
Representative Cushing.
Yes, thank you. Representative Edwards referenced the term harm reduction.
Yes.
But I don't know that it was explained to everybody. Maybe you could share what the term harm reduction means.
Sure. Harm reduction is an approach that can be applied to lots of different situations. All of life involves risk, right? Anytime you get in your car, there's a risk that you could get in an accident. Harm reduction could be something as simple as remembering to buckle your seatbelt or wear a helmet playing sports. Harm reduction applied to the field of public health is about, first of all, the metric that they use, that harm reduction advocates use, is human well-being. If you're maximizing for anything other than human well-being, like order, then you will probably have a different opinion about what solutions are best. But the harm reduction lens is a lens that views human well-being as the thing that we should care the most about. And in the context of drug use and drug abuse, it's about meeting people where they're at, providing them the tools that they need to stay healthy, stay safe, and as soon as they're ready to get treatment, harm reduction advocates are there to meet them and hopefully, transition them into abstinence. So it's a public health lens that focuses on using the current best practices in evidence-based policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Devil's advocate question, Representative.
Sure.
Am I correct in when you spoke earlier that that drug use or somebody gives someone else drugs is a harmless activity?
No, it's not harmless, but it doesn't contain the element of somebody harming somebody else without their consent, which is really what I think,
Okay.
right, which is what I think that is the only appropriate tool for the blunt instrument that we call prison.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Leary.
I just want to say it's nice to listen to you and nice to hear and see your passion. It's been pretty good.
I had a lot of coffee at the harm reduction symposium, so.
Drug caffeine.
Oh yeah, and speaking of which, coffee can also cause harm, but Nobody's, you know, nobody advocates arresting me for using coffee, so we're all harm reductionists already.
Oh, well.
No? maybe we should add caffeine to the list of prohibited substances, yeah.
Thank you for your testimony.
Sure.
No further questions? And the chair calls you through.
And get back to it.
I'm Ian Freeman, one of the co-chairs of the New Hampshire Liberty Party. There was a similar bill earlier. You heard my testimony. It was focused around compassion. We already heard a lot about that this time around. So this time I'm going to focus on, in case you can't find compassion for your fellow man, how about your wallet? Because a lot of people are concerned with spending when it comes to the government. Well, I don't remember the number offhand, but it's, I think, at least $30,000 a year that the state spends to incarcerate somebody, maybe 36, 40, I'm not sure where it's at these days. But it's not cheap to do that. And so I do agree with the representative who just spoke that if you're going to be incarcerating somebody, it should probably be a person who's a danger to the lives of others. If we can take out people who are in jail or in prison for drug use, drug possession, that's going to could potentially reduce significantly the budgets that need to be spent to keep these people housed, and of course, as I pointed out earlier, won't destroy as many lives. Rick Van Wickler, many of you probably are familiar with him. He's the Cheshire County Jail Superintendent and has been for as long as I can remember, many years. He's a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They've changed their name to Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I believe he's the chairman of their board of directors, and I'm actually surprised he's not here today. He comes into this committee pretty often, takes a day off, and comes and talks to you. But I asked him once what percentage of the people in his facility, now he runs the jail, so not the prison, but the jail in Cheshire County, what percentage at any given time of people who are in that jail really shouldn't be there? Who are there for drug possession or other non-violent offenses where there was no victim? And he said 40%. So, that's a huge number of people that just don't need to be behind bars, and the taxpayers of New Hampshire do not need to be paying for that. And again, it also hurts those people's lives and makes their lives more difficult. So that's all I have to say about that. Thanks.
Questions, three? Seeing none? Thank you. I have no more pink cards on 1792.
Yeah, you do.
I do?
One more, right? Elizabeth Edwards? I mean, Elizabeth.
She already spoke. She already spoke.
Never mind.
Okay, sorry.
Forget it. I was
We'll
thinking
close the
of,
public hearing then on 1792. And
We'd like to invite you to visit freekeen.com. Freekeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. Freekeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. Freekeen.com.
I should be in Keene, New Hampshire with the Free Staters.